We're super excited for this panel, which is being hosted by LaunchCode. We have a very dynamic group of individuals here. Super excited to hear from them. So this panel is titled Startup Talent Playbook, Talent Strategies for the Age of Intelligent Automation. Our moderator tonight will be Brian Feldman, who is seated on the far left-hand side. He is the Vice President of Business Attraction for Greater St. Louis Inc. The panelists, next up is Ms. Nicole Schnook, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Ox Insights, Jim Winkelmann, CTO of Presage Technologies, and Gabe Lozano, the newest CEO of LaunchCode. We're super excited to have you all here, and take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody so much for being here. We really appreciate it for Startup Week. This is something that's incredibly important, not just in the talent ecosystem, but also in general for St. Louis. In my role at Greater St. Louis Inc., we are the regional economic development organization representing the 15-county bi-state region, the private business sector. And as we look to grow the region, I can tell you, someone on the business attraction side, what companies care about is talent, 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 workforce. When you look at all the biggest factors about why companies decide to relocate or most likely expand into a region, always those factors, if you were to rank them 1, 2, 3, talent and workforce and availability of it and cost of it is going to show up in that respect. So we are thrilled to be able to welcome our 3 panelists here to dive into the evolving landscape of sourcing and managing and reskilling and upskilling talent in the age of intelligent automation, because we all know that every day technology is evolving, it's changing, it's growing, and how we go about managing our most important assets, which is our people, that's something we have to really keep in mind. So with that, I'm going to ask, I know their names and organizations have been announced, but I'm going to ask our panelists to provide a little bit more color as to what they do and what their organizations do. So let's start with Nicole.
Great. Can you all hear me? Is this okay? Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Schnook. I'm the COO of Ox Insights. We are a 15-person digital marketing consultancy that serves private equity clients and their portfolio companies. We're based here in St. Louis, but we are actually a remote first company, which will be interesting to kind of chat a little bit about in the context of how we build our organization. In my role, I oversee kind of everything operations, from finance to business development, to people, of course. And so talent is a huge part of our business. We're a people business. We're a consultancy. Like, people are our largest asset. And so we think about people and how we hire people and keep people happy every day. So excited to be here.
Hi, my name's Jim Winkelmann. I am the CTO at Presage Technologies, not Presage, as a lot of people have said to me today. But yeah, Presage, we are working on turning any camera into a vital monitor. So think of looking at your cell phone and we say, this is your heart rate, this is your breathing rate, this is your blood pressure, this is your breathing waveform, pulse waveform. So we're trying to develop software developer kits that allow for our tech to be embedded in anything, whether it's a cell phone, a baby monitor, the camera at the back of the room that's filming this. We're trying to make these software developer kits where other companies can just drag and drop our tech into their own stuff. So think like Teladoc. Hey, we want to have Vitals in Teladoc. Okay, great. Here, take the Presage SDK, and now you can have Vitals in Teladoc. So that's what we're working on. It's obviously pretty complex technology, so we really need to hire top-tier talent to help us develop this tech. We're hiring across the board for developers in terms of system architects, machine learning, AI, traditional computer vision, low-level programming, all this stuff. And it's difficult to find people, for sure. It's a challenge to find people in these niche areas. But we're slowly developing strategies to help us get the right people on board that I'll talk about with some of the later questions.
Gabe, LaunchCode. So we just want to make it fast and cheap to learn new skills and get better jobs. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. And, you know, we try to complicate a lot of things with, I would say, educational funnels in general. We use fancy language, but the reality is most of us have to have a job to pay bills, and most of us want to upscale our lives kind of as we go. And when you look at LaunchCode's history and then moving forward, I think the nuance of the story will always change, but if you just look at kind of like speed and cost of learning new skills and getting better jobs, that's the stuff that I care a lot about.
Well, great. Let's start off very high level. Obviously, we're talking about talent strategies in the age of intelligent automation. In your years of scaling startups, how have you seen your or your peers' talent strategies evolve over time with the rise of technology and AI? Gabe, let's start with you.
Well, I'd say you have a ton of changes. So, I mean, the initial stuff for me, which is interesting, is the middle of the biz, is the way I like to look at it, is the easiest to automate. And so a lot of things, like if you look at the front end and kind of back of the biz, the front of the biz is typically how do you sell? And so this is true in any business, not just like LaunchCode or the companies up here. And then the back, it may be anywhere of how you do some sort of like really nuanced processing, but typically in my head, the back is actually how do we build things? How do we build things to actually have products you put in market or to run the biz itself? The middle of the biz is typically where we have this sort of like really nuanced intelligence that we build with domain and institutional expertise. And so those may be people hanging out in a dashboard, people hanging out in some sort of spreadsheet, where you look at that like knowledge that people keep gaining and gaining and gaining by doing something, and then when you talk to them, it feels so crisp and it feels so nuanced that they make great decisions. And so that middle of the business is actually the easiest to automate. And it sounds counterintuitive because we tend to look at those people and we're like, holy crap, those people are smart. But that's actually what we're pretty good at with machines already today. And so that's the stuff that if you want to recognize if you're running a business, so I'm also on a board of a company that I built where, on a quarterly basis, we're going back and we're thinking about the financials, the P&L proper. And you need to look at, typically you can do a lot of magic hand waving of like, this is what creates revenue growth. That's pretty hard to project, but you tend to know your expenses. And you tend to know collections of work that fit in that category I just talked about. And that's the stuff that, I've seen people have a lot of success in automating. And a lot of the other things tend to be slightly experimental today.
Jim?
Yeah, I mean, from the start of our business, we've been AI focused. But in terms of how AI is changing our hiring process and the business in general, I would say it's a combination of AI and the advent of remote work, right? So we've started to use some services to allow us to outsource great talent from around the world to help us with bookkeeping, et cetera, other OpEx portions of the business. And that in combination with all the software tools that keep coming out every day, whether it's monitoring expenses, timekeeping, helping manage all of our benefits, hiring external HR people that are also using new programming tools. That's kind of helped us and been a game changer. When we first started out, we were hiring people to do all those things internally that were very expensive. But through the combination of offshore and different, not crazy AI tools, I think stuff that's been around maybe for 20 years, but it's just becoming more mainstream with the different programs and packages out there. That's really what's kind of changed us. With the state-of-the-art AI, I mean, we've been battling that from the beginning, and that's where you really just, nothing is different from where we started, and we're just trying to find top-tier talent that's in-house. They need to be right there in the battlefield, helping us develop that.
Is that battle getting easier?
I would say the battle is getting harder. Google, Facebook, Apple, we can't compete with those salaries, unfortunately. So, we lost someone recently that is making a ton of money at Apple, like an amount we could never pay. It's just, great for him. But yeah, he's a really smart guy. But I think what is going to be key for us to get great talent is going to be making really cool stuff. Yeah. Like, you need to get people motivated to work on what you're working on. So even if someone says, hey, come to Apple and we'll pay you $1 million a year, you're going to be more motivated to come work on something that could change the world, like blood pressure from a camera that you could put in, Somalia or something to supply people like in very low income areas of the world with access to healthcare. I mean, I think that gets people more motivated than anything. And so, yeah, we're just trying to go as fast as possible and build super awesome stuff, and we think that's what will attract the right talent.
And not everybody wants to work for an Apple or a Google.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a big corporate mentality, and then there's others that want to work at a place where and you can walk to the CEO's office and you can talk to people and have a relationship with them. So I would imagine that it's trying to find and source those types of individuals that may be that sort of.
I think you got to find people that have a startup mindset. They don't want to be at the big dumb company, as my CEO would say. But I mean, it's hard. I mean, if a lot of this top tier talent coming out of PhD programs, et cetera, that are some of the best in their field in AI, if Facebook says, hey, here you can make $1 million a year, or you can go work for a really cool startup. It's tough. It's still a tough sell, but yeah, you got to find people that have that drive to be at a startup. And I think making really cool products is going to be what's going to be key for us attracting that talent as well.
Let's get Nicole's thoughts.
Yeah, I think just piggybacking on that, what we are really excited about, and we have to lean a lot on this startup mentality too. A lot of the competitors that our team might be looking at are extremely well-funded, larger companies or large consulting firms that, McKinsey, Bain, BCG can pay a heck of a lot more than we can. But we have to get people that are really excited about the vision of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build. And the other element for us that's a little different, because again, we're in a services business, so it's not engineers working on cool Gen AI tools, but we are, what I didn't describe a little bit earlier is we are sort of a hybrid consultancy and digital marketing agency. And so we're really trying to find people that can do both. They can do the consulting work and they can do the digital marketing work. And the reality is right now, in the US, there are about 200,000 digital marketers, and not that many of them think like consultants. And so we talk about it to our team like we're creating a new type of professional that can do both of these. And if you're excited about that and you're excited about being with a small team, then Ox is the place for you. But if you want to do something tried and true, go for it. You're going to learn a lot doing that. But we're really trying to sell them, sell them, I guess, but get them excited about something different. And that's been working for us so far. And then the thing I would add on the talent acquisition piece, again, we are constantly trying to increase the number of people on our team because our ability to do work is just limited by the number of heads that we have around. And so the area where we often would get bottlenecked is on sourcing. And what's cool, and what it sounded like you were alluding to a little bit earlier, is there are so many new AI tools that can help with sourcing. And so we are constantly trying to figure out what's the next tool where we can pay them to try out. How do you find, here's a resume, or here are 2 resumes of the people on our team. Go find other people that look like them. And there's all kinds of tools right now that can go help you find that. And what's different, again, is we're trying to find people with a kind of narrow skill set. And so the ability for a headhunter or someone just searching LinkedIn to find that might be a little more challenging, but a lot of tools can help us do that much more effectively.
And you have some experience at a little bit larger organizations, right?
Yes, so I worked at Instacart for about 5 years prior to joining Ox. So would it be helpful to give a little bit of the people's perspective from that?
Yeah, because from that perspective, like where to automate, when to automate, that's a huge component to this.
Yeah, exactly. So I worked at Instacart in a number of roles, but most recently I was in a go-to-market strategy role serving our retail partnerships, but focusing on fulfillment solutions. So what does that mean? That means I was working in the area of the business where we were trying to build solutions to get goods, to get groceries from our retailers to our consumers' shelves. And I was working with the account management teams, the sales teams, to get those solutions into our retailer partners. So I was constantly thinking about how do we do this fulfillment thing more effectively? And some of the things that we looked at, and I spent a lot of time looking at, was, are we able to automate this, not necessarily with AI, but with robotics? So we actually looked at, the easiest way to describe them is giant vending machines. Can giant vending machines actually pick groceries more effectively than people picking them off the shelves? And turns out you need a lot of grocery orders to make that giant vending machine worth it and more effective than the people picking the goods off the shelves. And what you really need is you need a lot of new demand in a new location to make the math pencil. And the reality is, like, we're still not seeing that be an effective way of replacing humans. And so what that makes me think a little bit more about is there are things, there's a ton of automation happening in the algorithms of how we get orders to the right shopper based on where they are, and which store is something being picked from based on the customer had 20 items and there are 18 items that are available in that store, but 17 in the store that's only 1 minute away from them, and kind of all the I mean, really it's machine learning going into the decision making of how you automate the back end. But at the end of the day, we were still realizing that people were required to actually pick these goods effectively. Now, ask me again in 5 or 10 years, and that could very easily change, but that was constantly something we were thinking about. And so a little bit to Gabe's point, how you think about, like, where in the chain of the product that you're offering can you automate? Well, for us, it wasn't at Instacart. It wasn't the person picking the thing off the shelf and actually delivering those grocery bags to the customer, but it was kind of in the decision making that the systems and the algorithms were doing to make sure we were building an optimal solution to kind of tighten that process as much as possible.
So you're saying that robots are not taking our jobs yet?
I am saying that,
Okay,
and you
good.
can quote me on that.
Okay. Probably could have gotten someone to moderate this panel. No. Want to ask Gabe about the needs of employer partners, and obviously it's not just startups; it's also the larger enterprise companies out there that need talent as well. You know, I'm a sports nerd. I make sports analogies. Wayne Gretzky said, you know, not skating to where the puck is, but skate to where it's going. How does LaunchCode make sure it's educating the next generation of the workforce in the skills that not necessarily what companies need today, but what they're going to need tomorrow to make sure it's still relevant?
A lot of thoughts there. So, you know, for me, I always go back to what's easy to automate, and then you want to stay away from that, right? Yeah. So if you're training people to do something that we know that we're already on this, like, rampant path to recognize correctly on a P&L, don't train people to do that shit. So you look at, to me, it's the ends of the business. People that know how to build things. So if you look at what's changing on how you build things, if I was going to look at, like, and that's part of the LaunchCode focus, although I hope that expands over time. But in how we build things, the way I like to think about software is, you know, for many decades, the traditional software, so AI, ML, machine learning type, all these things, you know, we've thought about this for a really long time. We're like 81 years into this. This is not new. But a lot of things we've had commercial success with is actually just traditional software. You know, we give a computer a set of rules, and when it doesn't do what we want, we call it a bug, right? And so we've built huge systems to be able to recognize this in the real world in commercial success and to train people to do that. That's not where I'm focused, right? So a lot of things, it's if we have needs that we think are going to hold it for a while, then we put people in those directions. But when you're actually talking to customers and you're sitting with customers, and you look at the collections of work that we want to recognize better on a P&L, how we get that work done with software then changes. And so when you think about the probabilistic nature of that, I care about that. And so that could be anywhere from teaching a creative brain how to abstract away all the technology so that they kind of hang on the top of this. It's interesting, we were sitting with VML, the CTO of VML yesterday, and we were talking about, I was asking what in his career would change over the next 10 years. And so we were talking about all these, like, technical, low-level things that he's thought about. And he just said, I want to work on a higher abstraction, right? And so thinking how to build, where you take this human intuition that we've built in the middle of businesses and then kind of move it to the back where it's easier to get involved in the technology and learn how to build things that have sorts of adaptation to novel condition approaches. That's what we do as humans, right? And that's what we're trying to do with machines. Sometimes we get that right, sometimes we don't get that right. But just listening to the pulse of the companies and learning their collections of work, This coming year, one of the things I'm going to do with customers is actually just shadow them. Just sit with them for a day and learn their businesses so we think about how we better integrate with those customers. And on the back of that, we learn how to actually create talent that looks like that. And then lots of thoughts on kind of other parts of the market. But I think most of it is just like sitting in the heartbeat of the market where you're in industry and market, seeing work getting done and seeing it rolled all the way back up into things like your P&Ls, and then going backwards from that and just saying, how do we do this right? The nuance of that, I suspect, will get crisper as we go, and will change as we go.
Okay. Any additional thoughts, Jim? It's okay if not. Okay. I want to ask you, though, about kind of the culture within a company that is embracing the rise of technology and automation. You know, when I think of managing talent and AI and automation, it's finding a way to embrace the technology while still valuing the human component, because people do need to pay their bills. And I would imagine most people would want to have, you know, the right individuals that are going to embrace it and not feel threatened by it. Has that been a shift in the workplace at all, in finding a way to manage that culture where there's embracing, using, optimizing, but also still valuing the human side of talent?
I think if you talk to any of our developers, they're not scared at all.
Good.
You know, all the different Copilot, ChatGPT, all this stuff out there, it's made our developers much faster and better at coding, but it's still pretty stupid. It's not going to write some game-changing algorithm that can do X, Y, Z. So in that sense, I don't think any of our developers are nervous. Again, back in the day when we had people doing more just like administrative things, yeah, those jobs are at risk, because now instead of having 3 people, you can maybe have it like a fractional single person, and then using all the different programs that, you know, we've discussed today. That same job that 3 people were doing, 1 person can do. But yeah, the developers, I don't think are scared at all.
What about non-technical people that aren't the ones actually building the stuff?
I mean, we're kind of pre-sales at this point,
Okay.
so I can't really speak to that much at Presage.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, we're slowly about to cross that chasm, hopefully.
Okay.
And you know, I'm sure we'll be learning about all the different sales tools out there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. Any thoughts?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, Gabe and I were talking about this last week, that what I'm excited about is we kind of give our team the carte blanche to be like, if you have a tool that is going to make your life easier, please just let us know and we will probably pay for it for you. And that kind of gives people their ability to figure out what's going to make them faster. And we really encourage our team to embrace, like, ChatGPT is the most straightforward in my job. I joke that ChatGPT is my chief of staff, who's very friendly and helpful. But how do we actually just move forward like 30 minutes and give us time back and be a little bit better at what we're doing? And for some people that might be one tool, for somebody else it's going to be something else. But again, we're a people-based business, and so it's just like kind of giving that tool choice back to the individual to make them more effective.
Got it. And then from the non-technical side, even at your days at Instacart, were there any culture issues there, seeing that, or did you not touch that too much?
I think that the bigger theme coming from Instacart that I would identify is it was just like constantly something that we were trying to get better at it as an organization, and we were constantly trying to push it, like, okay, where else can Gen AI or machine learning or whatever make us better? And so I wasn't as close to the technical side. I wasn't on the product side, but it was definitely, I mean, as we IPO'd, I just remember thinking, gosh, this is like really becoming front and center of everything we're talking about to the public markets, which, like, it was such a hot topic at the time that of course we had to have a strong perspective. And as an aside, what's interesting is our COO actually ended up leaving to go lead AI at Microsoft. So it was a very just important part of the ethos there. But again, sort of to what Jim was saying, it just wasn't it wasn't like a fear that, and kind of what I was saying with the robots earlier, it wasn't a fear that it was going to take over. It's just, wow, what an incredible opportunity we have to take advantage of these solutions.
I want to ask you all about the need to upskill employees, because again, technology is evolving, it's changing. We have no idea what things are going to look like tomorrow, let alone 6 months, 6 years from now. You don't want to have to completely turn over your staff. You want to have a culture where individuals stay around for a long time. What are you all thinking about around continuously giving new skills for your current employees to keep up with the demands of technology?
Yeah, I can go first. So again, because we're sort of trying to create what we call like a new type of professional, this hybrid consultant, digital marketing expert, there's just constantly skills on either side of that our team is going to need to get better at. And the reality is there just aren't a ton of people like that available to us right now, and so we know we're going to have to train people. We're fortunate right now that we're pretty small. We can get a handful of really great people, but in a year we're going to need to start finding people that are at the start of their career or maybe a few years into their career and figuring out all the systems that we need as an organization to get them training in both of those capacities. And on the digital marketing side in particular, the need for our team is going to constantly need to evolve. So one of the, I don't know, I guess it's like change is the only constant, applies to digital marketing. Every day, all these social media and search engines are changing their algorithms slightly, and so a marketer needs to keep up to understand what the latest and greatest is. And so if we take people kind of hands off keys for too long and just into strategy world, they're not going to know what the latest is. And so we know that we're going to constantly need to be retraining them and giving them new exposure to what's happening in the digital marketing world so they can stay up to speed and provide great advice to our clients. So it's very top of mind for us. And we're not perfect at it now, but we tell our team that we're committed to continue to...
Continuous improvement.
Exactly, continue to support them in that way.
Perfect. Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of monitoring the technology landscape and figuring out where we need to go next, for us, a lot of it is monitoring hardware. Ideally, we are embedded on a computer chip that's on every single camera in the world. That's our goal. So trying to keep up to date with like, the latest and greatest new GPUs that are smaller, the new Jetsons coming out, the new processors that are coming out, trying to just keep up to date with testing and running some of our software on new hardware is kind of key for us. Honestly, that's what's led to the advent of AI today. It's hardware, right? These algorithms were developed a long time ago, but it's just now that the hardware is cheap enough that it's, in your pocket, it can run inference with some, neural network, et cetera. So my team is trying to keep up to date with all the hardware that's out there in terms of technology, for sure. And then I just give credit to my team on this. I mean, they're updating me every day on the new AI assistants, right? Like, hey Jim, check out this. Can we buy this? So credit to my team. They're really go-getters and try to stay on top of what the latest and greatest is. And then just from an intellectual property perspective, in terms of tech, speaking more to the hiring, one of the ways we're trying to get top talent and stay on top of our competitors in terms of offering the best Vitals by Video out there is doing deep dives on Google Scholar, finding the latest and greatest Vitals by Video papers, machine learning papers, and then just personally, I've done it several times, going on LinkedIn, finding that man or woman that wrote this paper that's the lead author and be like, hey, I love your work, let's talk. And that keeps you at the forefront as well of offering the latest and greatest.
Before we get to Gabe, to your point about your own staff taking the initiative, that just goes to show how important it is to have people on your team that are curious, that love technology, and are lifelong learners, right? Because at the end of the day, if you have to push them and tell them to keep you abreast of the change in technologies, that's not going to work. They have to want to do it on their own.
Yeah, if you're not self-driven, you won't be at Presage for long.
So, side note, it was funny when you were saying that. I actually did a couple years ago. I was reading these papers where, like, when we throw away a lot of data on training things, and then we try to, like, rescale back to the real world to get the appropriate distribution. So, like, on a binary classification problem, if you have something that's completely mismatched, you can create new samples, but that may take extra compute to do. Or you throw away a lot of data so that you get kind of like a positive negative that's like equal, and then you can like kind of draw the shapes and you try to get the real world distribution. But I remember like reading these papers from students, like how they were thinking about it, and it was like trying out their math, and I was like, this doesn't work well. But I found these people from Google that seemed to be slightly more clever with it. And I literally remember like stalking them on LinkedIn, hitting them up, and then one, trying to hire them, which they had no interest. But two, just to pick their brains. So that resonated really well. Yeah, I don't know. I think the nuance of what we want people to upscale will change kind of by company, by market. Sure. What I would say is that everybody needs to be at least slightly technical. Like, that's just the world we're in. And it's accessible to literally everybody. Kamada, who is over here, is running our sales at LaunchCode, and she called me last week and was talking about how she's actually going to do one of our programs. And I was like, this is awesome. Because it was like one of the first things before I joined the team, I was just like, who here programs? And I was like, I just wanted to see hands. And because we don't want things that we work on in the real world to feel like magic, right? And so we can intuit this, right? We can look at basic things that people have been teaching us, like math, since we were a little kid. And it's not that we're always like doing complicated math in our heads and whatnot. Like, we have calculators and computers that do these things for us. But it's nice because we actually kind of have the shapes of math in our head, and we can kind of know what things look like. And when you can't do that, like when you look at a lot of the Gen AI stuff, you really just have, like, we're averaging out kind of human knowledge that we've stored in things like words and concepts and stuff. And now we're like applying it in line in our jobs, right? In some cases it's helpful, in some cases it's not helpful. In the common case, it still feels like magic to people. It should not feel like magic to you. And there's no reason why it needs to. Like, everybody is smart enough to literally engage in a meaningful way. So the upskilling that I would say we all need is to be at least slightly technical to wherever that takes you. And you may surprise yourself. And that's really the bet that we make at LaunchCode, is that when people have that sort of aptitude, which everybody, in the case of things like programming, tends to have that aptitude, and then that kind of creative use of it, which we use a lot of creative things in the real world, and then you put that together and you put in the work, you may actually build things that just literally surprise yourself. Sometimes you see something come out of your head and you're like, wow, I can't believe I actually did that. So that sort of, everyone needs to be slightly technical to maybe super technical, upskilling. That seems pretty common across every company, including our own company.
Want to ask about the actual places to source talent. Obviously, there are great organizations like LaunchCode that are doing an amazing job, that have a niche in the market with a lot of people that are changing careers. Obviously, universities have been around for a long time. Not everybody knows what they want to do when they're 21 years old. Don't decide to get a degree in computer science. There's lots of boot camps that are out there. I'm curious what ways Aux, Presage, and other organizations that you've seen at the startup level, where they're looking for talent to meet the needs of, the next generation.
I'm going to pass it, but I'm going to just say start with us.
Yeah.
Please email me, text me.
It's Gabe at launchcode.org,
Gabe at
right?
launchcode.org.
Got it. Yeah, for sure. But Jim.
Yeah, I mean, you named obviously a lot of them. Universities are something we've been starting to think about more recently, but it comes obviously with the upskilling, because people maybe haven't had the experience that we've needed. As I mentioned earlier, there are a couple of AI sourcing tools that we've started to see pop up. So I think Fetcher is one of the ones that our team has used, Fetcher.ai, I believe. If somebody looks it up and it's something different, please let me know. But there are a bunch of different tools coming up like that we've used. I think the other thing is, this is like in on conversation about automation, maybe not the most exciting answer, but don't underestimate the power of connections and LinkedIn. We have a very, very well connected leadership team, and honestly, we all have like login access to the co-founders, and we can just like look at who they're connected to and be like, oh, this person you used to work with, can we talk to this person and hire them to join our team? And sometimes that actually works. And also our not just our co-founders, but the rest of our team, we have so many referrals that come from our team. We have multiple people already on our team that were referred by our team, and that's how we've built. And a lot of the times it's the skill set that they've learned at prior employers, and the experience that they've had at prior employers gets them really excited about then coming to join us. So we just have that like word of mouth and referral engine that we've been relying on more heavily recently. That's probably the.
Yeah, 100% agree. The best hires we have are people, current employees, friends, or past coworkers. That's the best route to go, because it's hard. It's really hard it's a pain in the butt to onboard someone just to realize like, oh, hey, they can't work with other people at all, or hey, they're a complete jackass, and then you got to fire them, right? So having the known devil in the room, like having recommendations from current employees has been the key to getting the best people on the team. But also LaunchCode has been very helpful. We currently have 3 launch coders helping us with our machine learning training. So right down the road here in the Cortex at 20 South Sarah Street, we have a system set up where we're having people come in, then we take your vitals, we take it with all these different cameras, the launch coders are uploading that data to AWS and helping to do analysis on it and all of that kind of stuff. So
cool.
That's been a great tool for us. One, lowers our risk, and not having to bring someone on full time right away for a junior level position, and then 2, just the great training they provide, everything as well, coming in there, and they're really, really good go-getters. I mean, they are hard workers. So credit to LaunchCode for finding the right people as well. You could probably teach us all some things.
Can I bring you in a sales pitch?
Yeah. But just word of mouth is key, and then the reaching out through in the field, I'll be following certain researchers, and I'm like, man, she is badass at what she does. Like, we got to get her on the team, and I'll just keep pinging them on LinkedIn, like, come on, you sure don't want to talk? You don't want to talk? You don't want to talk? Like, so I think that's another key to finding that really like niche talent that, especially in St. Louis, is challenging to find.
Can I add one more point, actually?
Yeah.
And your point on St. Louis talent helped kind of reiterate this. One thing that's been interesting for us is our leadership team has a vision to build out a hub in St. Louis where we have so many people in the St. Louis area. But the reality is, right now, to get the best talent for what it is we're doing, we're a remote company. Half of our team is in New York City. We have someone in Charlotte, someone in Austin, in LA, and we're all over. That works for us because we're a client-based business, and our clients are all over, and so we're in a remote capacity anyway, and we have all the tools to work remotely with our clients, and therefore also to work remotely with our team. But what we're excited about is sort of, can we build hubs in different cities and kind of seed us with the talent that we just know is totally kick-ass and we can get from anywhere, but then kind of going back to the upskilling, really learn how to like create that training engine that will help us find and build the right talent in St. Louis that wants to be here, because it's something we're excited about, but it's not as obviously present to us right now. So it's a vision we're constantly moving toward.
Well, we would welcome you with open arms if you would like to grow so much.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much.
From a remote standpoint, is that hard to build that culture? That's what, that is the other side of the coin of the flexibility, is not being able to build that team camaraderie. Is that something you see at all?
Fortunately not. It's a challenge for sure. We'll have a leadership team meeting here in St. Louis and we'll have 1 or 2 people attend that are remote, and the 3 of us in person kind of start riffing and stop looking at the camera, and the person on camera is like, well, what am I even doing here? Because you're just having this conversation among yourselves. So it's hard, and we're not good at it. For anybody that attended the keynote at the kickoff of Startup Week, the keynote on Monday was Casey Grelly, our CEO, and she was talking about something that's really important to us is conscious leadership. Something a lot of people haven't heard of, but if you Google it, you'll probably learn a lot. The biggest thing that I would say about conscious leadership, it's being aware that we are people with feelings. Sometimes we're gonna be deep in our feelings and I'm gonna be angry and maybe I'll push that down and not wanna deal with it. But what we really strive for is an openness to true candor, positive and sometimes challenging. But what that means for us is the leadership team is super open to kind of meet everybody as a person. I have really difficult, really open-ended conversations with the co-founders on like any topic from deep in the weeds business thing to personal life, and that's just the nature of how we operate. But the 2 of them and our leadership team setting the tone for that openness, it means that when we get on calls, like nobody's stuck behind a veneer of, oh, I have to be professional and perfect all the time. Like you bring your full self, and you bring your full self if you're on video or you're in person. And everybody who joins Ox knows that's part of it. And so with conscious leadership and those values at the core of our culture, it really helps cut through a lot of that noise.
Good. I do want to keep an eye on time because I want to make sure we have time for questions. Are we okay on time-wise? Okay, good. Let's get back to the automation specifically, and we had talked about job security and the culture. What ethical concerns are there when it comes to automation? Imagine there's a lot that's there.
Talk about remote work again.
Is there things that you think about, or?
I do have some comments on remote work, actually. Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think our team is remote right now. We have someone in San Francisco. I have myself and another one of our developers here in St. Louis, along with the 3 launch coders. And then we have the CEO and founder in the Virginia area, as well as another system architect up there, another low-level developer, et cetera. So it's good for task. Like if it's task work, like, hey, we need a new front end here. We need this code to run faster. We need this to work with this new database, right? Yeah. It's fine for that. It's horrible for innovation, in my opinion. It is not good. I think to really have innovative companies, it's the water cooler chats where the crazy ideas come about. So we try to work with it. We're doing it now, but we're placing a very strong emphasis on trying to grow in St. Louis, so we can have people together in the room, and it's not forced. Like, there's nothing more I hate than those like, hey, let's have cocktail hour on Zoom. It's like, oh, come on. I know what the purpose.
It's a good idea in theory.
Yeah, I know what the purpose of them is, but it's not the same. It's not the same, and it feels like you're pressured to be there and everything. It's when people are relaxed, I think that's when really innovative ideas come about. So, yeah, we're pushing hard to grow here in St. Louis and get people together in the same room, and you'll obviously do a hybrid workforce, but I think it's key for the super challenging problems we're trying to solve.
Cool. Gabe, any thoughts on remote work?
Not really. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts. I don't think they're more interesting than what I've heard here. I was actually reasoning through the ethical stuff, and I was thinking back to Stuart Russell. I was listening to this pod that he had. He was getting interviewed by Lex Friedman. I think the interview might have been like a little bit earlier, but I was listening to it in August of 20 when I was driving, and it was basically like use common sense. It's like, we're used to building technologies, and they move at different speeds, and we integrate them at different speeds, and they replace things, and then we do new things. Like, we can already intuit this by just looking at human history. And so it's just use common sense. Like, what are things that we want as humans? We all want connection, we all want purpose. And the purpose bucket means we all want to use our brains to participate somewhere in our economy and society where we're capable and desire to do. So as we build these things, this is like use common sense. Like we don't create. Yeah.
Are there any tools that help to bias common sense better?
Well, I think our own brains are pretty good at it. It's like we use common sense to allow somebody to change the flow and to care about the content you just said. Common sense is just something that's kind of baked in us from doing life and by being around other people. And so I think that, our brains are the best tool for that. And so if we look forward when we're building things, clearly we want to build things, automate things, and do other things and so forth. But we just use common sense.
Okay.
Yeah, common sense. That's all my comments on this subject.
Yeah, no, you're totally good. Nicole, I want to ask you about just trends in general as it relates to automation, looking at peer companies. You've seen different size organizations. What trends are you seeing in how different companies kind of approach how to automate, where to automate, and when? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would, I think I would kind of go back to some of the comments I made earlier of actually a lot of the core automation and the core enabling of people in terms of giving them tools to help automate is where the ties have been. But there have been, I'm going back to my time when I worked in private equity before going to Instacart, where there was probably less automation than I would think, honestly. But we would think of it, this is just maybe a different type of, it's not automation, but outsourcing is a big thing. And outsourcing was very, very common in what we did in private equity. And so I guess automation in terms of figuring out, is it a tool that's going to help you solve something, or is it another person who's going to help you solve something? And constantly being open to getting that expertise from somewhere else that isn't you, and kind of your willingness to mold and change depending on where you need that expertise, I think is the commonality to success at the different organizations that I've been in. But I don't know if that really answers your question.
Yeah, and does it differ by size of the company and how they embrace it? Because I would imagine
Depends on which
different
size
resources.
large organization you're talking about. Because a place like Instacart that's tech first and constantly focused on automation and innovation is very willing to take risks. And as I mentioned, have Gen AI be at the center of what it is that we're telling our investors we're doing. And sometimes it's sort of honestly kind of silly things that I probably am being filmed, so I shouldn't say something that would get me in trouble. But there were elements of adding AI that I was like, it feels like everybody's adding AI in a way that sometimes feels authentic and sometimes just feels like we're supposed to add AI because we're supposed to. And that wasn't, but that was Instacart kind of taking risks and doing new things, whereas kind of going way back, being at a large organization, working at an investment bank, there were just so many regulations in that world that there wasn't a lot of opportunity to innovate or automate anything. It was kind of like you work by the book that we've given you. And so I guess it sort of, I would say that it varies more by the culture of the place and the type of work that was being done rather than the size of the organization. That would be like greater correlation in terms of what I've seen.
Okay. Before we get to questions, I want to ask, and we'll start with Jim, and we can get Nicole's thoughts and Gabe if you like as well. One piece of advice that you would give a startup founder on how to navigate talent strategies in the age of intelligent automation as time moves on. If someone was to start a business and they were to say, Jim, help me out. How do I navigate this landscape? What would you tell them?
I guess, if you're a startup, you probably don't have a lot of money. So, I know there's some recruiters out there that have great AI tools.
Yeah.
But I would start with just people in your network. That's where I would start. Because really making mistakes and hiring with the very first like co-founders of the company, that those got to be critical hires.
Right.
So I would go cheap and boots on the ground is what I would do. I would not use automation for this. I know people, similar to what you said, like, you know, we're in our Series A right now, and it's tough out there, but it's not tough if you're AI. Like, people are just slapping AI on everything. I know this is the purpose of this talk, but you know, it's a very useful tool, and I think it's going to change the world, but it's not applicable in every single situation. And if you're a startup with no money and you're trying to pick some people, you know, find people, I would look, you know, what are past companies you worked at? Try to go recruit people out of there. I think that's where I would start. Now, as you get later on, again, I have friends that are in recruiting, and yeah, they use crazy AI tools. So yeah, if you have the money, then I would probably go to a recruiting firm. Again, if you're a startup, you're probably not going to be able to afford or have the time to get these tools and understand how to use them.
Right. Okay.
I don't know. I tend to agree with you. You know, having been in the startup space for a while, most of it just get started, you know, keep going with just a couple people, and it's grinding it out. If you want to go use tools, learn the tools, learn yourself, build things. It should be easier than ever before if you're like non-technical to become slightly technical and do something useful. But yeah, I have no additive advice. That felt pretty good.
I might, this maybe is a different way of saying what you're saying, but I would just be ready to be scrappy. I realize that's probably like the most obvious startup advice, but like when it comes to finding the right people for your team, it's not going to come in a pretty it might not come in a pretty box. Right. And then also be complementary. So if you're building out a team, the last thing you want is to find somebody who looks exactly like you. Find somebody who can contribute to what it is that you're doing in a way that levels you up. And I think if you take that advice with every one of the first however many people you add on your team, and granted it's a little different if you're like, well, I need another engineer to actually solve this exact problem, but just figure out ways to make sure that you're complementing what you already have, because that's how you're going to build out that well-rounded team that's going to help you succeed.
Awesome. Well, I think now we can open it up if there are any questions for our panelists. I'm sure they would be more than happy to answer them. So
And for Q&A, since
Yes.
we're recording, we're going to ask you to step up here so we can use the mic.
Anybody have any questions? It's usually the first one. There we go. Perfect. I like it.
It's technically the second, because we had a question.
That is true.
Yeah.
So my name is Terrence. I'm with Bath and Kitchen Refinishing St. Louis. We're a home services business, but in my prior life, I worked in the world of instructional design. So that's the brain that's been listening to you all, not what we do right now. So I was thinking about, from an automation standpoint, oftentimes when things are automated, it frees up time for individuals to do other things, or it helps them to expedite things. So when you're talking about shortages in these spaces of qualified employees, where there's some need for cross-training, there's need for upskilling, that 4 to 8 hours that may be freed up through automation, are you all thinking about how to redeploy that time in upskilling or helping individuals develop additional skills to support your business internally?
Kind of depends on the health of the business, you know. So, like a lot of what you saw in markets in recent years is actually businesses just trying to become stable. And when you're holding on, some people had to do risks to kind of get, you know, break even or back in the black slightly. Some people are already there. And so really in those cases, you may reallocate if you actually found massive wins and you kind of held in the black. But yeah, I think most of the businesses in the last couple of years were just trying to look at automation for pure stability. And then I suspect, you know, in some of these pocket cases, kind of in the margins of the market, bottom of the top, you see where that's not necessarily true. But I suspect what you'll see maybe at large in this coming years to decades is where that reallocation of cycles could either be, you know, feet on the street to go learn customer needs or learn new market needs, or just kind of trying new stuff where you're looking at kind of growth on the top of the P&L. Good question. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with our current state of the business, if there's always more to do than I can, so that would just allow me, when stuff like that frees up, it's like, awesome, we can go even faster. Because there's a huge list of items always that I can't get to, so there's that. But I guess, also speaking to what you mentioned, like building up your foundation, like if you do have more free time, going out to see like, hey, is there, do we want to switch off AWS, or do we want to do something that can maybe cut costs some way? So yeah, having more time to explore those things, or whether it's bettering yourself as a manager, reading self-help books, etc. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is that we are fortunate to have people that can go across different skills, and so if they free up capacity on their client work that they're doing, I'm like, great, you can come solve this operations problem for me, so come figure this problem out. And so, yeah, to your point, there's just kind of a never-ending list, and so it's sort of limited by our ability to scope out a problem and give it to someone to solve, but the more hours they can clear up with automation, the better.
So I wanted to build on that because that's like, the reality is a lot of people like to build things. We're also like super lazy. And so sometimes when you actually, I was listening to I don't know if you listen to Gradient Descent pod at all. It's the Weights and Biases guy, Lucas. And he's like talking about, he was interviewing a guy where they're just kind of using Gen AI for some kind of co-pilot-y, things kind of pass your tab complete. And he's like, I don't actually like feel that more productive, because he's like, I get my stuff done and then it's just like I take time off. And so I actually think that's actually a good way to think about automation too, is getting work done and just having more mental cycles to do nothing, like being relaxed, is actually a pretty helpful thing for all of us.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions we have? Yes.
Hello, my name is Kendra, and my question is, I actually was just discussing this with my husband last night. When searching for talent, specifically, and I'm going to try to make this make sense, specifically if you are a startup and you're doing something really unique, you kind of need talent who knows about that particular industry, or at least how it works. So when you are looking to hire and have people to join your team, how do you go about preventing them from taking everything that you've taught them and running and starting their own company? Because just even networking, I see a lot of people, they're like, oh, I worked 20 years doing this and now I'm doing it myself. And I know that happens, but specifically with manufacturing, like I've done extensive travels internationally, building relationships with manufacturers. And so when I bring someone into my ecosystem and I say, hey, your job is to work with products, new and innovative products, custom products with the manufacturers, I don't want them to take all of my resources and then say, hey, I'm going to do it myself. Because I know NDAs only go so far if you know that they've done something, but sometimes people can be sneaky. So how do you prevent that?
I don't think you should, but I think it's a really good question. I mean, it's a instinct all of us have to like protect some sort of like domain and institutional knowledge. But the reality is people that work with you, you want them bleeding out into the real world. One is just for like a personal thing. As we get older, we all want to have some sort of like broader distributed impact. So even if it's not directly in your pocketbook, it probably feels pretty good that, you help create a pipeline of people that went and did cool stuff. The second, they may become your customers. The third is maybe they'll refer people back into your business to kind of plug those gaps. Fourth is fill in the blank. But I would generally say we fight against that instinct to try to protect and to hold on tight. And we actually like welcome people learning stuff in our ecosystem and then going back out into the world and using it in all sorts of ways.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really like non-competes and stuff. I think they kind of suck. Like if you're an expert in some field and you sign a non-compete, then it's like, what are you going to do? But I think, someone else, if they leave your business and go into the same industry, one, that's normally good for the industry. It lets you know you're in the right spot, right? More players are coming to the table. Another thing is though, I mean, you want to make that be a place they want to stay, right? That's up to you as a founder of the business to say like, hey, don't leave, come here. Like, what can we do to make you want to stay, right? So I think that's up to the founder of the business to create some unique competitive advantage where it's not just a commodity and there's a reason to stay with that firm.
The last point I would say is beyond those is if you really are, and I totally understand the fear that someone might take your idea and run with it. All business is based on trust at the end of the day. And if you have trusting relationships with your manufacturers or trusting relationships with your people, you'll be able to just go that much farther, whether they leave you, but you trust them and maybe they take something, but they don't take something else, or you have such strong relationships with the suppliers that you work with that they're like, I'm not gonna go work with your competitor because you asked me not to. I realize I believe in a nice world a lot of the time, and that's not the way the world works, but I do think that a lot of business, if you can focus on, they're right, I also believe that I want to create a working environment where our people leave, and of course they're going to take they're going to take everything they learned from us and go run with it elsewhere, but if our client relationships are based on trust, they're going to keep coming back to us. So that's how I think about it.
Jessica Gaines. So I run a general construction company and construction programming with my partner back there. But so don't know a lot about AI, but part of the services that we offer is project management. And obviously there are a lot of AI tools out there that we use in our business that is not very much consumer facing. So we have some ideas about how to make it consumer facing. No experience in AI at all. What pointers would you have on starting an idea like that? Where would we start? My thinking, I like to move really quickly. I'm in construction, so I like to have a plan, get it done, and see it come to fruition. From everything that I've researched and seen, it seems like this kind of stuff takes years to come to fruition. So what, where do we start? How do we do that in a way that's tangible and I can realize it now?
Just pick one little thing and get done in a day or a week and get started. I mean, it's when you're talking about project management in any industry, it's just organization of the operations of a biz, right? So you have two parts of a business. You have goals, things we want to get done, and then we have operations on top, which is kind of how we get it done. So humans, we tend to say project management because we organize things in projects or maybe package them more holistically as a portfolio. And then we have tasks, which are the work we want to get done. Just pick the smallest piece in that as something in the real world for yourself or for somebody else that you think might be a customer. And see if then you can go use common tools to automate it and just see if you did it faster and cheaper. And if you did, typically the things that we measure in the real world when we automate stuff, there's two ways and kind of common metrics to measure it. One is human out of the loop. So let's say something end to end, that kind of collection of work just gets done automagically in the common case. Well, in that you should see 2 orders of magnitude drop on what it takes to actually the cost to get this done. And then the speed should end up being 1 order of magnitude or many orders of magnitude faster. And then the quality you look for, how you would execute that work versus somebody else, like a human versus machine, and that should be on par. And so you don't look for orders of magnitude gain, you just look for on par, and then you look for the gains in those other areas. If you do something where you're using Gen AI, you're surfacing something, you keep a human in the loop, the mechanic should be at least 1 order of magnitude faster, at least 1 order of magnitude cheaper, and on par with quality. But pick something super, super simple, and then see if you can get it done in a day or a week.
Yeah, I agree with everything he said. I think also as businesses want to move into AI, I think trying to keep your business data focused is important. So whether some type of database or where your customers are coming from, all this stuff, if you can have it structured nicely in a data format, it might not be today, right, that you solve problems with this data, but data is what's going to help you start to automate things, right? So just always keeping in mind when you're, even if you're not looking for a new AI tool, but if you're doing something in the business, setting up some new project or something, like just trying to be like, hey, let's make sure our data is really structured well here, because there could be value here for us in assisting and automating things down the road.
Okay. I think we have reached time, so thank you all very much. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists here?